another episode of Connecting with Jennifer Filzen. I am your host, and today I have my guest, our amazing guest, Reverend Dr. Carnes. Welcome. Welcome,
Thank
Carol.
you. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you.
Oh, we're going to have so much fun. And if you'll forgive me, because Reverend Dr. Carnes is a lot to say, can I just call you Carol? Is it okay? Or would you prefer Reverend, or would you prefer Doctor? I mean, we can do it the whole thing.
I just like Carol.
Thank you.
Actually, my grandkids call me CC.
Aw, that's so cute. I love
my
that.
initials.
It's your initials, which is just darling. I love it. I love it. Okay, well, let's get started. You are someone that I met through my church, Center of Spiritual Awakening in Pacific Grove. I am in love with that church because I love Dr. Bill Little. And you know, of course, know of him, and he's your teacher as well as the leader of the church. But one of the things I love about him is he is a physics professor at Naval Postgraduate School, as well as our spiritual leader at the Center for Spiritual Awakening. And that is such an unusual combination, right? Which is why it appeals to me. I don't have to leave my brain at the door. If it's okay, let's get like a little, you tell us, how did you get involved in this wonderful path of being a religious thought leader, and how did we get here to where we are? A little history.
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that because it's a very long story. It would be a different program. I want to comment on what you said, though, about Dr. Bill, physics and spirituality. I dedicated my last book to him, which was about Emerson and New Thought, because I said Dr. Bill is very Emersonian in that he combines East and West. And that is going to be a must-have in this world. If we're going to get out of that old dark place of superstition and dogma, we're going to have to bring some science in. And so science and spirituality absolutely go together. And Dr. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, said, the day will come when science and spirituality walk hand in hand. That day is here.
I love it. I love it.
So I got into it like other people do, with just, I didn't believe anything I read about the universe or religion. In other words, the world's perception of reality didn't fit with me. I thought there's something off here. So I just started looking. And one day I asked for it. And then before you knew it, I was in one of these centers in Hawaii. But like I said, it's a long, long story. It's a really good one, but let's not do that today.
That's okay. We'll save it for another time. But it does kind of lead into the first question that I love to ask. What makes you special and unique?
Well, no, I'm not special. Nobody is. But everybody's unique. Everybody's unique. You know, the old no two fingerprints alike, no snowflakes alike. All sentient life is individualized like no other individualization. So we're all very unique, and how we express ourselves might make us seem special, but special means above or better than, and that doesn't sit well with me. But if you look at it this way, let's say someone is very financially well off and they are generous, they're philanthropic, and they give to wonderful causes, and just it's a constant circulation, and their friends don't, that they might seem special in that milieu, in that particular, they're special in how they handle their money, you might say, because it's not the norm. But as far as how most people say, oh, you're so special, I never quite know what that means. Because I don't feel special, but I know I'm unique. And so are you.
I love it. I love it. Well, the way I look at it is, here you are, a very acclaimed thought leader in science of the mind. And I hope I'm getting all the words right. I'm trying to,
yeah.
I am a layperson who's trying to understand it all. But, the majority can just say religion, right? But the way you think of it, and ultimately, everyone, you're just going to have to buy Dr. Reverend Carnes's books to get a full understanding of how amazing this human being is that sits with us right now. But ultimately, you are looking at religion with a very egalitarian and fresh approach. So maybe really what I should be asking is, what is your why? Like, how did you decide that this was your journey? And again, I know you have a huge background, so you can cherry pick how you want to answer this, but we all have a why. What drove you to pursue this?
I don't ever ask why questions. There's no answers to why questions. There are answers to how questions. How did this happen? And so ever since I can remember as a small child, I mean, really little, 2 years old, I remember thinking, what is this? How did this happen? Who am I? And I also thought, I'm supposed to tell people something. I remember this frustrated me as a 2-year-old because I would walk around the yard thinking, what is it I'm supposed to tell people? And I couldn't remember. So there was kind of that unconscious quest, even though I went to school and played tetherball and danced in the recitals, and it was always there. And when I heard about what we call New Thought or Science of Mind and visited one of these centers, right off the bat, I went, that's what I'm supposed to tell people. And I knew that it was true. And I had never heard anything in religion that I felt was true. I thought perhaps there were truths in it, but that it was metaphor, it was story, it was parable. But I wanted the real stuff with nothing added on. I wanted, I guess I was looking for the science part too. So the how questions, this is what I tell students. I always share the story. I apologize if any of you have heard it before. But imagine ancient Polynesia. I used to live in Hawaii, so it's easy for me to imagine. And the volcano erupts. And so the natives are wondering why it landed on that village and not their village. Maybe it was because we planted taro and they didn't. Or maybe it was because we wear our hair long and they shave their head. It's that kind of thing. They should have been asking the how question. If they had asked the how question, how does the land get formed by fire? Well, then that's the first science question, right? How does anything happen? So what I love about New Thought, and I know you probably will ask me later what it is, because this is kind of what it is. It's looking at how things come to be. How can a universe even exist? It must come out of something. And how can how can consciousness become matter? How can matter become conscious? I mean, all of these how questions lead us to the inevitable answer. Everything starts from the invisible within a field of some kind of intelligence. And there you go.
Oh, I love it.
Everything
So
starts from within.
I love it how and let's go into what is New Thought and Science of the Mind, because you're right. Like, just changing the question from why to how is a whole new take. It
Yes.
removes it removes a lot of judgment, doesn't it?
Judgment, superstition, because when people can't answer the why question, they will make up something that satisfies them. And that's how superstition gets going. And that's how, story gets told. Um, that was never enough for me.
Interesting.
I wanted straight talk. And so when I heard this teaching, even some of the early teachers of Science of Mind were a little too churchy for me. And so I started devouring books by people like Emerson and Thomas Troward and Ernest Holmes. Was very straightforward, just beautiful, a beautiful perception of reality. And what I love about New Thought is we don't say we have the last word, because if you allow science to be to inform the teaching, you're going to realize there's more to it. Now, I don't think the basic truth will change, but our relationship to it will. How, like the principle of, this is another one, a very basic example. The principle of electricity was around in biblical times and before. But once we discovered it, the next steps from that moment on right up to this moment is how do we use it? It was already there. So in the future, when we learn more about the universe, I think it will be more about how can we expand our relationship with this infinite, whatever it is, this power? How can we personalize it? So it's not a, it's a spiritual way of perceiving reality. That's what New Thought is. And basically it's about cause, discovering cause. Where do things originate? And how can we set up a new cause if we don't currently like the effect of the old one? That's the how-to of it.
Wow. Oh, this is
Yeah, well, I
amazing.
was right.
Let's see if I can process what you're telling me, because it's so layered, right? So what you're saying, I think, is that because people don't understand why things are happening, they call it God.
They blame it on something, or they attribute it to something. The
A
weather, the
miracle.
economy, the government, God, women, blacks, Asians. They blame somebody because they don't know the power they have to create the experiences they're having.
So what then the second part of this whole conversation is that because there's an energy field where, using Mike Dooley's kind of thought, labeling it as thoughts become things, other people could call them prayers. And so we manifest it by wanting it to happen. And therefore the energy field, which we might call God, is what eventually produces what it is that we're thinking about. Is that fair to say that's what New Thought and Science of Mind is, or am I missing it?
It's not about wanting at all. The spirit, God, is not an outside power observing us. As the master teacher Jesus said, it's within. The Father's within, the Father being the source. So we arose from something, but it didn't abandon us, it became us. There's so many ways to approach that. It's so
This is
exciting
awesome.
already.
I love you for this. This is so great. More.
Okay, let's try this one. Ernest Holmes said, God makes everything out of itself by becoming the thing it makes. That's very different than saying God created you and God's up there or out there or somewhere else and you're here. No, it's saying whatever God is, this infinite power, this perfect love, is within you in the field of consciousness that knows itself as I am. And you are personalizing in your unique way the I am. So what we say I am and add on to it becomes the direction we give to the spirit as principle to make manifest in our lives.
Wow.
So God is making everything out of itself by becoming the thing it makes. And once it becomes the thing it makes, it doesn't know what it's doing. It only knows to do what follows I am.
Interesting.
It's a mouthful, but it's so true. If you think about it, if people go around saying I'm a victim, blah blah blah, and they manifest it. They manifest partners who treat them like victims, or employers who treat them like victims. They get victimized over and over and over because they believe they are a victim.
Mm.
And once people heal that, whether they do it through therapy, spirituality, there's many ways to help us undo those past patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Their life changes.
Mm,
We've all done it. We've all changed our mind about something and our experience changed.
wow. Right.
So we speak of spirit, God, as both presence and principle. The presence is I am, universal aspect of our own nature, which acts as the principle of co-creation or the law of mind, people.
Love it. Wow. Oh, thank you for sharing all this. There's,
Down
there's,
to is we are interacting with a universal power to create an individual life. It's telling me my internet connection is unstable. I hope this doesn't do something stupid.
well, worst case scenario, we can always do this over because, or do it part two, because
Okay.
there's so many golden nuggets that are just, oh, it's just amazing. So there's the belief that for a lot of people that you must give yourself over to, insert the name of your, whether it be Jesus or whatever, and you must ask forgiveness. How does that fit in with what we're talking about and what you're sharing?
It doesn't fit at all. There's no
Interesting.
place for it because there's no judgment in the universe. It's neutral. It's in the business of becoming, and
Interesting.
it doesn't prove what it makes out of itself. So there's no outside power looking down and saying, "You bad girl, I'm going to get you for that." Remember Maud? The
Yeah,
guy's
yeah, yeah,
going to
yeah.
get you for that. But that's just not true. So we may need to forgive ourselves, and that's usually what it comes down to. I mean, I've done that. I've done things in my life I regretted and actually shamed myself. And I've had to do some forgiveness to myself. It's like, if you knew better, then you would have done better.
Yeah.
You talk yourself down.
Hmm.
A lot of our work in New Thought is self talk.
Hmm.
Rather than praying to an outside power, we speak to the power within
Ah,
as if it were our own voice.
ah,
Yeah.
love it.
So prayer is a whole different thing than what we do. We do spiritual mind treatment. We give our mind a treatment of spiritual truth because we're having a problem because it originated in our mind. It's a lot of power, but
It
it's
is.
not the kind of power that's over anything. It's just that it's the power of the life force seeking to express through us. And we have the wonderful choice of how to express it.
Wow. There's just so much peace and kindness wrapped up
Yeah.
in the whole thought pattern.
There's no judgment, no
Oh,
devil. There's no opposition to the pure intelligence and absolute love that we believe or feel is how you would accurately describe what the world calls God. Pure intelligence, absolute love, formless, birthless, deathless, and yet it is constantly taking form and giving birth to itself. Quantum physics is not far from this.
quantum physics.
It's that's why Dr. Bill is so cool because he taught physics. It's not that far off. I had a conversation with Dr. Bill when I was up there a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about all this, and he said that's why quantum physics is right there with us. We're aligned with that whole perception that we arise out of something and that it comes through us. It's a wonderful, healthy, you know,
Healthy. Yes, healthy.
William James, the great philosopher, psychologist, a noted author. He referring to New Thought, he said, "I call it the religion of healthy mindedness." Um, it had been designated as a religion. I'm not sure it ever should have been. Actually, I don't think it needed that, but since it arose in the transcendentalists and in more modern times, it kind of was a statement not against traditional religion, but attempt to clarify it Ernest Holmes said, I don't want to destroy religion. I want to liberate it from superstition and dogma. That's what I want to do too.
Right, because it's hard to, there are a lot of churches that are losing membership because I think people feel like when they walk through the doors of the holy building that they are being judged and punished and admonished and lectured at, and quite frankly, who wants to be subjected to all of that?
Well, not only that, it doesn't feed their intellect. People have evolved too much to be asked to just accept old stories on faith. It's like, I want to know what you're talking about here. Well, there's some principles. So when I first came into the science of mind, I needed that intellectual piece. My heart was already open. I mean, I was, I almost fell out of my body. My heart was so open. But I needed a balance. I needed more than feeling. I need to know something. So the intellectual part is very important. And younger people will not put up with that superstitious and dogmatic uh, judgment of them. So there's always a segment of the population that will gravitate to that. That's fine. It could be a stepping stone. It could be where they belong. But for the great majority of younger people, they
Right.
won't sit still for that. They want to hear something that makes sense, like I did.
Yes, and that's what's so exciting, right?
And also something that's democratic, that is for everybody.
Yes. Yes.
Men, women, gays, straights, black,
Yes.
white, Asian, Hispanic, children, old people, young people. It applies to everybody,
Yes.
which
And
is really
again,
wonderful.
without
There's no
judgment.
exclusiveness in it.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh. So we know that you serve people of faith, but tell me a little bit more about you. Who else do you serve in your life? We all have, our inner circle, and then, it expands. Who are the ones that are lucky enough to be served by the beautiful Dr. Reverend
What do you
Carnes?
mean by that? I teach classes online on Zoom.
That's cool.
They're small, but they're great students, really
And tell me
interesting.
about these students. Are they theologians? Are they ministers? Or are they
There,
lay people
anybody who
like
wants
me
to
who
take
want
it,
to?
but right now I do have 3 ministers and a couple of other people. But for the most part, they are people who've been in the teaching but want a deeper look at it.
Mm.
Um, they want to delve into it more.
Well,
There's
I'm so
just it's
fascinated. I might be one of your students in the future.
I'd love to have you.
I just have to get through my book. But yes, yes, yes. I mean, it's just so. I've been searching for so long for a home, a spiritual home, and I've tried so many different things. I feel like a faith hopper where I go and check stuff out, and it's like, oh, this feels good, but it doesn't quite fit. It's like trying on clothes, right?
Almost everybody, a great percentage of people who come into our teaching did exactly that. They started with astrology and runes and crystals, and then they got into Hinduism and Buddhism, and they started just following this thread of started pulling on that thread of truth. And then they arrived where we are. It doesn't mean those other things are lacking, they're not. But it suited them when they heard it expressed in a very American way, a very up-to-date modern language. It just suits people that are looking for that. So yeah, almost all of us started with other things. I explored reincarnation and astrology, you know,
Yeah.
lots of
And
things.
then that makes me wonder, like, a lot of jobs, a lot of different hobbies. There's always an attrition rate. There's always some people who are like trying it on, but then they're like, this isn't for me. And then they move on to something else. I'm just so fascinated because before meeting Dr. Little, before meeting you, I have never heard of what this is. And in fact, the day that you came to Center for Spiritual Awakening in Pacific Grove, I met a gal who was actually in town visiting, and she always likes to go to that particular church when she's in town. And she was just so happy that her timing was such to see you. And she said, I live in, where did she say she lives in? I think she's from the Oakland area, or maybe somewhere East Bay, somewhere East Bay, San Francisco. And she's like, I don't know where to find this. Or maybe she was in a different city altogether. But anyway, the point being, she's like, I have no idea where to find this. I said, maybe you can Google it, because I think even you were saying that it's a growing concept.
Well, there's centers all over the place, and there's a lot of them are closing their doors because of the very thing I'm talking about is, and I really don't want to go there because it's my soapbox. But if you try to blend a lot of other things with it, you confuse people. Let's put it that way.
Got it. Got it. It needs to be laser focused, right?
I think so. That's what
Yeah.
people are looking for. But we don't we don't have such a big attrition rate because what happens is people come in needing something, they learn this and their lives get really good. And so they just go out and live it. And I always say I used to train ministers and I always say, your job isn't to get people to stay in your church or center for life like Catholics. It's called catch and release, is that you want people to grow and get out there and change the world. You don't want to keep them. There'll always be a core group, and as long as you have a building and you have to pay a minister's salary, you need a core group. You need some people that are going to be there, but that's not the purpose. And that's where some of them got really hung up. They spent more time trying to build a center than they did changing the consciousness of humanity, that's who I serve.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I have a longtime mentor whom I've known and loved and respected and sat at her feet since I was 25 years old, and I'm 52 now. And she would teach me, it would be group therapy stuff, and it was Women in Discovery, Patricia Munson, and she would teach us all. And then I would go off in the world and use what I needed. And then when I needed a refresh, I would come back and get
Yeah.
my next helping. But yeah, I would be gone for several years at a time because I would be working on the homework that I was given.
Yeah.
And then there were other folks that just were with her all the time because they needed that constant watchfulness, that mindfulness of, okay, I got to be held accountable.
The community.
Yeah.
Some people need that, and it's a good thing. Spiritual community is very powerful.
Very.
Especially
Yeah.
in today's world. As long as it doesn't become a private club,
Right. Right.
you have to be careful. One thing you asked me how I got into this, and I should have said this because I forgot. It happened because I learned to meditate. I took transcendental meditation in 1975, and my mind cracked open.
Hmm.
I mean, my life, I was different from that moment on, and
Wow.
I started devouring all these Eastern mystical books that my brother had, who I was living with at the time in Kona, but I never was interested in them because they were too esoteric for me. I started devouring those things. And the next thing I knew, someone told me that's another magical story, about the center in Kona. And I went, and the minister said something about thoughts or things. I went up to him afterwards and I said, "Did you say thoughts or things?" He said, "Well, yeah, I think I did." I said, "You need to call the New York Times. That should be a headline. Those 3 words could change the world." He said, "They don't want to hear it." I said, "Oh, yes, they do." And that's probably was the first step towards ministry. Even though I never wanted to be a minister and I never wanted to be in a church, I was very anti-religion. But the teaching got me. And I wanted to know more about it. And I kept meditating all these years. And finally, meditation has become a part of our teaching. It never was. When I first came in 1975, a lot of the ministers then that were well established were anti-meditation. They thought it was something from some Eastern teaching. They didn't want anything to do with it. But now everybody does it. So that's when we talked about the teaching evolving, that's one of the things that happened is meditation got absorbed into it because there's so much research on meditation. You can't deny the efficacy of it. It's magic. So that's really what led. I don't think if I hadn't started meditating, I'm not sure I ever would have walked through the doors of church. Pretty sure I
Wow.
wouldn't have. Yeah,
Wow. Amazing. So
it
then
was.
if someone is wanting to make that change, what advice do you have for people that you can, like, there's so much here to unpack, but like, what general advice do you give for people who are searching?
Follow any thread that tells you you have the power over your mind, over your choices, over your decisions, that there's something about you that is universal as well as personal. Any thread that leads you back to yourself. I would definitely advise anyone to learn to meditate, because some of this just dawns on you when you're meditating, as far as the feeling of well-being, the feeling of happy for no reason, as we call it in meditation. It's a very natural way to be. Meditation takes us back to our real self, I think. So I would advise people to learn to meditate, and then stay away from anything that says you're inherently evil, you're born in original sin, there's a devil trying, all of those old stories that led to all sorts of horrible things in our modern world. And really, you look at the Adam and Eve story, what that did.
Mm-hmm.
We're all Eve, we're still being blamed for everything.
And that is why I really wanted to talk to you about my book, right? Because
Yeah.
as you know, and I'll just remind the audience because I'm still in the process of writing it, so I'm not marketing it just yet. I'm just still putting it together. When Roe v. Wade was overturned with the Dobbs decision on June 24th, 2022, I knew that I had to share some of the stories of women's social progress and how they've gone up and down and up and down over the last couple of 100 years, because I just want others to be informed. And in my journey of looking at women's social progress, I came upon a wonderful book by Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman, and how it said that, well, this current iteration of Christianity is yet another rehash of other religions, other faiths, and stories that came before it. And so it's just the current version of the, omnipresent, leader. And it's funny because as much as I've studied theology, I just never have the right words to define. So if I sound like I'm stumbling over my words, I really am, because I don't have the language to say everything, which is why I wanted to consult with you. The one thing that got me in the When God Was a Woman book is a look at how did we go from a matrilineal divine goddess culture to a patriarchal warring, women are subservient to men culture. And it documents how over thousands of years it pretty much was the fight over land and assets. And so the premise of the book primarily is, women were pretty much, the base of how people are made. And so they didn't understand exactly how the reproductive system worked, but they just knew that women were the creators. And so therefore, things were being passed down through the matrilineal lines. But then other groups came in and they had to migrate out of their volcanic, mountainous regions with the fire and brimstone. Well, they were in volcanic regions, and so they were losing their land, and so they had to go elsewhere, and they were finding areas that were very fertile, and it was already inhabited by matrilineal culture. And so their first attempt was, well, let's marry into this, and so maybe we can become part of this culture by marrying into it. But then since all of the matrilineal lines were handed through the women, the guys were kind of like, well, what do we do? So, over time it was this back and forth, and then the Levites, if I recall, they were the ones who were pretty much the most warlike, and they're like, all right, well, we're going to come in, and it's also in the Old Testament talking about them, but it's like, we're going to come in, we're going to rape and pillage and take them over. And so you've got these children where their parents have been killed, and now they're being brought in as slaves and concubines, if you will, of the victors. And so they've got this memory of like, well, wait a minute, it wasn't these are some of our traditions, and so we're going to hold on to this. So I'm doing a horrible job of explaining what this book is all about, but it all pretty much culminates into, how did we get into this thing? And then we've got the story of Adam and Eve. Well, because the people who were in charge did not want the goddess religions to be dominating, they started vilifying it. So let's ignore reproductive systems entirely, and let's just have this story about she came from his rib. That doesn't make any sense, but okay. And then let's shame the snake and the relationship between snakes and Eve, because, well, the serpent was the thing that was used in a lot of prophetess type of things, and apparently there's a you can talk to God if you are bitten by a snake. The venom acts as a what's the word, hallucinogenic, and so therefore they could talk to God. And so so the snake is part of that religious symbolism. And then the fig leaf, that was the tree of knowledge. Well, a lot of the figs were used in that, and you would see them everywhere. And so suddenly the fig leaf was what protected the modesty. So anyway, the book was saying, this whole story of women being subservient to man, it's all made up. And here we are in America, where we're supposed to be separation of church and state, but yet it's so ingrained in our culture. And so forgive this big, huge buildup, but my main thing is, how do we change the mindset of patriarchy-based religions to a more egalitarian mindset? Because every time we women are finally coming into our own, we get smacked down again.
Wow. I read that book, but I don't remember all that. I think you have to deal with now, and what is happening now has been, like you say, happening for eons. It's very confronting for me to say this, but I will. The men who think we're less than are inferior, and not all men do. I could talk about my son and his age group. He's 58. He's beautiful. He doesn't see women that way at all.
Yeah.
On the other hand, he was raised in a society where they did have an edge. Men did have an edge. He always did it, so there's that. But the men who treat us badly, who abuse us, who deride us, who try to keep us down, are afraid of us, because we have so much power over it. And I'm talking about sexually. So much power over them. And so, like, you look at the Middle East, where if a woman gets raped, she's stoned to death. Why? Because she had so much power over that man, he couldn't help himself. Well, that's their rationale. But that's a way of saying, you are so powerful, I couldn't control myself. And so this is oversimplification, and I'm not a scholar, obviously, but it has to do with that male God stuff. It has to do with thinking the ultimate power is male. And anything other than that, anything other than white, straight, Protestant, whatever, non-Muslim, or Muslim. It depends on the religion.
Right.
And women and children and blacks and any other person who's not white and male gets vilified. It's like, you don't even have any value. We can do whatever we want to with you. You see that all the time.
All the time. And it's
But
so
talk about
frustrating.
slavery. That's a great example of when you enslave people.
Yes.
What is wrong with you? You know,
Yes.
what was wrong with those men? Well, they had a white Christian God that said it's okay because you are the ultimate and they are nothing. And that comes from these stupid stories. Now, the Adam and Eve story is a beautiful story if you look at it in a different way. Is that the tree of knowledge is the tree of good and evil, or two-ness. It's almost a Buddhist story. So once you leave the garden where you are one with God, with everything, the garden of oneness. Once you go on into the third dimension as male and female, you're walking into the realm of two-ness, polar opposites. That's why God told Adam to name everything. So you've got love on one end of the spectrum, or let's say oneness. The whole spectrum is the love, and on the bottom, you've got indifference and everything in between. Affection, commitment, hate, blah, 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 right? So they were cautioned not, if you want to stay in oneness, you can't be in two-ness. Well, they said, well, two-ness looks like fun. Let's go. And it was, of course, the serpent and the temptation of eating of the tree, right? Well, God already knew this was going to happen. He wouldn't have created them in that way, in the sense in the story. Because why bother? Why would you create man and woman and then say, don't do that, but knowing they would? It's the nature of curiosity, right? Um, and of course, Eve got blamed for the whole thing. And still is. And I remember Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist who spoke to Bill Moyers on PBS, when they asked him about the Adam and Eve story. Bill Moyers said, well, that's why women have been so subjugated. And Campbell said, yeah, and we've been pretty hard on snakes too. It's a great comment. People are scared to death of snakes. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a whole lot of things, but it comes down, men are afraid of women because men don't know who they are. And so they're identifying with a power over rather than an internal power. And internal power, you don't need to hurt anything or anybody. Internal power is an awareness, all is well, I am, and I create my life from within. So women are just taking the blame for all of the lack of self control and the lack of self respect and the lack of having a view of reality that's entirely superstitious and wrong. We're taking the brunt of it, always have, because women, we know better. Women innately know better. Now, there are some women out there now that are emulating their husbands and boyfriends because if they don't, they're going to get hurt. That's how, they don't, the same thing. They don't feel they have any power of their own.
Correct.
So, I can, this is my thing. I can go off on this. And
No,
like
I
say,
agree. I agree. We wonder, it's like, well, why are we women self-sabotaging? Why aren't we all coming together? And it usually is tied to finance.
It used to be economic, and now that women are making their own money, it's a little different, and things are changing.
But there are still women that would like to be the traditional kept women, and it's like a caged bird.
Well, it's like fundamental Christians, but they're not the majority.
Right.
They're not.
Right.
And that whole Roe versus Wade thing, it really isn't about pro-life or pro-choice. It's about keeping women in their place.
Yeah.
It's about keeping women out of power. It's keeping them down.
Yep.
It's a control thing.
It's obvious.
You can't control your own body. You don't have any power.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to be alive today because all of this stuff is coming up.
Yeah.
All of these old beliefs are up for transformation. And that's why we have to challenge them. And that's why, for me, I think it's important for anyone who does any kind of teaching, be honest, tell the truth. Don't couch it in some, it's too important right now that we tell the truth. When you say, how can we change people's minds? It just depends on who you're talking to sometimes, but you just tell the truth. I remember, I'll tell you this little simple story. I was having lunch with a female friend and her husband, who I didn't know him until that day. And he was kind of a high-powered lawyer in Beverly Hills. And we were having a nice lunch, and he used the N-word. And I said, say that word ever again. And he got really, I can say whatever I want. Why shouldn't I use that word? And I said, because it makes you look stupid. And I don't think you really are. But he did just what you did. That's how you talk to people. You tell the truth. You don't say it's not nice. You say, you look stupid when you do that. No one wants to look stupid. So there's other ways, depending on who you're talking to. Or if someone comes off and starts going off on Jesus this and Jesus that, I would just say, those old stories don't actually apply in today's world, but there are bigger stories that would include them if you could look at it in a different way. Or I'll say, that's kind of what we're saying, only we're using different language these days.
Mm.
There's always, the devil was a metaphor for the temptation to succumb to your ego or your lower inclinations. It wasn't a real being with fiery eyes and horns. Joseph Campbell also said, when he was a boy, he was a Catholic, he said, they told me there was a devil sitting over here and an angel sitting over here, and I had to decide which one I was going to listen to.
Uh-huh.
It's just a metaphor for your local mind and your non-local mind.
Right.
Your
But we
non-local
kids,
mind,
we think it's real. It's like you get the little, the Hollywood, little devil. Hey, let's go drinking. No, let's go to bed. Yeah.
and those things are fine if you know they're just symbols. If you think they're actual beings, that's where things go off the rails.
Mm.
You got to know things are symbols. They're metaphor. They have a deeper meaning. And one of the beauties of metaphor is that the meaning depends on where you are in your own understanding and evolution. Like at one point, the Adam and Eve story means something to you, but now they mean something quite different. But it's the same story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it isn't that the stories are bad, it's how they've been interpreted.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So I'm loving what you're telling me. There's it's like a breath of fresh air, right?
How are you going to approach this in your book?
I don't know.
Okay, we can talk about that. We can talk about that another one time.
Well, because you know what, I think just sharing exactly what you're saying, because I have a lot of people in my life who I care very deeply for, that, are it's a whole spectrum, right? But when I come out with this book, if I talk about how it's all bullshit,
and you should,
then I know that I'm going to
well,
possibly suffer by losing some friends.
it's a risk.
It is. And I'm not here to make anyone wrong, Carol, but at the same time, I'm also wanting to defend, why should your beliefs restrict me?
They shouldn't.
They shouldn't. Why are we trying to vilify the lesbians and the gays and the trans and the people who identify as non-binary? Why?
Fear.
It is, but it's so easy. And here we are professing that we are flying the flag of freedom. Freedom for who?
Yeah, men, white men. That's what this whole MAGA thing is about, is making the world white again, America white again.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And that includes keeping women down and blacks down and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's so obvious. I mean, it's just so obvious.
So obvious. And yet
that they're scared to death because the world is changing. We're becoming all mixed up. Who was I watching? I can't remember. Some man was saying, "You don't think this world is changing?" Might have been John Stewart. He said, "Look at the commercials. They're all interracial couples.
Yeah.
Black men, white women, white men, black women, mixed kids. There's something going on for that to happen, because They spend millions of dollars on commercials, and they don't do them without thinking, researching deeply.
Yes.
So that tells you it's already happening.
Yes.
The dispelling of the myth is already happening. It's seeping into, and then these people that are afraid of it, they see that and they go nuts, because their world is changing, and they don't have
Control.
a large enough perception of reality to hold it. They can only see this.
Right.
And oh gosh, then we get into the dumbing down of education. Look what DeSantis is doing in Florida. He's trying to go back to 1949.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
So
rewrite history to where, slavery
it's
was
not, it's not going
beneficial
to
for the
work.
slaves. What?
It's not going to work because women won't let it happen. I'll tell you, in 1893, Swami Vivekananda came to the Parliament of the World's Religions in Chicago, and he was brought here by Unity people. And he was all for women's rights. And in those days, women couldn't even go to school, right? And he made sure his sisters got an education. So he was for women's rights. So he comes and he gives a speech. And he said this: the past belongs to strong physical men. The future belongs to strong metaphysical women.
Ooh,
That's us.
wow.
We are metaphysical women. Women are going to do it. And it's not by overcoming men, it's by education. It's by the way we raise boys, all these things. It's not going to happen overnight. But women are not going to go away. We're not going to become their, concubines. Those days are over for most of us.
Yeah.
So,
It's just a
and
fascinating.
men are not the enemy. It's ideas that are the enemy.
Correct. We are not here to vilify men, but the ideas that they've been fed.
Well, the ones that want us to keep us down, I vilify them, but not as beings, just for what they believe, their ideas.
Yes.
And people change. I hear that all the time. People never change. Well, yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
They change according to what they believe. You give them a better idea, they behave different.
Have you had the chance to see the Barbie movie at all?
No, I'm going next week with a friend.
Oh,
I
you're going
wasn't
to
going to
love it.
see it because I'm totally not into Barbie, but I hear it's
You are
fabulous.
going to love it.
That's
And
what everybody says. It's all about patriarchy.
it is so fascinating. I look forward to talking with you about it, but pretty much um the unsung hero is Alan.
Ken.
He's
Oh, oh,
Alan.
oh, oh, right. That's what I heard. I don't even know who he
he's the
is.
companion to Ken. But the cool thing about Alan is he stuck by the women and supported the women as they were going through their stuff, whereas the Kens were, diametrically, opposed. They were on the opposite end. But and then I reflect on it. I'm like, so really, what we should have is a bunch of Allens, right?
Yeah, well, I do. That's my son.
Yeah. And you know what's fun is that I've been reflecting on it. It's like, I think the woman that I am today is because I was raised by an Allen, a guy
Yeah.
who lifted me up and supported and was like, you can do anything. You've got this, Granted, I still, we have our Allens in a patriarchal world, so they still are raised with
Yeah.
this edge of,
I was raised by someone who thought women were stupid and shouldn't even be driving cars, basically.
oh,
But my son once said something about men who've been raised by women are different. That having a missing father was, on the one hand, hard, but on the other hand, maybe not. Depending on the guy, depending
sure.
on the man, but you know what I mean.
No, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
Women treat boys differently and give them a chance to see what women are really like, not servants to
Right.
some guy, but
Right.
you know, it's so complicated. It's layered,
It's
but
very
basically,
layered. Yes, exactly. These are sweeping, because there's, a whole bunch of variants. But yes, I agree. I think that women being educated and having the freedom to say this relationship is over, I'm going off on my own and I'm taking the kids with me. It really has changed a lot of the perception, and now there's a lot of talk ever since the pandemic. There's just been more of an awakening of, wait a minute, do I really need someone else to make me complete? No, I really don't. I might want that person, but do I need a person, especially one who's not going to appreciate the fact, and again, I'm generalizing, but like, do you want to be in a relationship with someone who lets you do all the household chores and doesn't appreciate
You're
the
talking about
emotional
my
labor?
youth.
And
My
sorry, what was that?
ex-husband did nothing. He did nothing. Never changed a diaper,
Yeah,
never did a dish. I used to
right.
have to beg him to mow the lawn. I
Yeah.
mean, that's how men were back then. Not all of
And
them.
and I remember divorcing my ex-husband because I was so over it. Like, okay, I'm working my tail off. You're unemployed and you're not even gonna like clean the dishes. You're gonna let
There
them
you go. I
wait
had
the
that
whole
same
week.
thing.
Oh, I'm expected to do all of the social bidding and all the shopping,
And go
and you
and
won't
go
even help
outside and
me.
work too.
Yeah, you won't even help me carry the groceries in from the car because why?
And you're only 52. I'm 82. That's a big difference. And that's still, you still had that experience
Oh,
of
very much
men.
so. And now, of course, I'm in the dream marriage where I'm married to a unicorn and he's fabulous and he dances with me. And he
Oh,
helps
I
me.
love men who dance. We
It's just
talked about that.
wonderful.
I love men who dance.
Oh,
If a
yeah.
man dances, he's already halfway there.
Right? Right. I
Yeah,
know.
or if he's musical in some way.
Oh, creative and all that. Yeah, I absolutely adore my husband. But yeah, it is interesting how we are transitioning and waking up. It's an enlightenment of, hey, do I really need to be treated like this? Hmm, right?
And the whole thing of the feminist movement was never about girls playing football. Some of them might want to. It was all about women bringing a feminine perspective to the table in corporate world, in the religious world, in families, in every setting, in the discussions about the future of humanity. We and still need, that's another big topic, the feminine perspective.
Yeah,
If you look at most, like the Senate, no, it's all men practically. There's some women now, but there wasn't a few years ago.
right.
Um, Everything's all white men, old white men. And we terribly need the feminine.
Oh, so much so. And I can't
And
believe these white men are the ones dictating what we do with our health. It's again, it's that control. They are so scared of losing control.
they're so scared. And they don't even know what femininity is, even though men have it. And like I always use my son, but any Obama has his male and female intact. Jimmy Carter did. There are other men who do, and you can spot them. They're very balanced. They're very even.
Yeah.
They're playful and they dance
Yes.
in
Yeah.
some way.
Yep.
And those are our favorite kind of guys, gentlemen. Um,
Yes.
but the feminine doesn't mean just nurturing. The feminine means big picture.
Yes.
So, the male masculine will say, and I'm not talking about men now, just the masculine aspect, whether it's in a woman or man. The masculine will say, for example, let's build a tower and we'll have shops and we'll have parking and we'll have office space. And the feminine says, great idea, but before we think about actually doing it, why don't we talk to the people who live in those little houses that we're going to take away from them? Why don't we find out if there's some way it would serve them if we did this? Could we integrate them into, that's the feminine perception. It's like down the road, the Native Americans, there's stories about some of those tribes, not all of them, but some of them would only make a final decision after they brought the women into the teepee and had their opinion. Because the women could see the future.
Yeah.
Women are relational.
Yes.
and they see relationships between things. So if you do this, you got to worry about that. Whereas the masculine only wants to do this because they're the achievers. The masculine is the conqueror, and the feminine is builds civilization. She's the one that builds the community. So they totally belong together.
Yes.
And when you get one person that's got both, you got a really powerful, creative human being who's not going to do anything that's going to hurt other people. It's going to include them. It's so simple.
It's funny that you mentioned that because I have often talked about, you got the blue pile and the pink pile, and where are we on the spectrum? And I feel oftentimes that I'm very purple because I'm a business owner in a male dominated industry, and I bring the feminine to it, but I can also hang with the boys and talk about cars
Oh,
and
me too.
do all
I can
that.
hang with the boys.
Yeah,
I
I
can go
really feel
totally in that
comfortable.
direction, but I know how to pull myself back because I have a strong feminine too.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely I can hang with the boys. I love
Oh
being
yeah.
around men. I love the company of men,
Oh
but
yeah.
especially the ones that are happy I'm there.
Yes.
Those are the guys we like.
Of course.
Like, what
And
do
it
you think, Carol?
Yeah. Yeah,
You
exactly.
know,
Yes.
not what do you feel, what do you think, you know?
And
So
let's celebrate you because you bring a really cool perspective and you make stuff happen. And yeah, you're part of the inner circle. Yeah, as opposed to, oh
yeah,
no, you can't.
it's
You
just
can't.
it's just widening things. It's expanding the idea.
Yes.
It's inclusive.
Yes.
And that's so much it's needed. And you
Yes.
can see the lack of it in politics, in corporations, and how we got into this climate mess is because we excluded the feminine. And nature was seen as feminine, so it became the enemy.
Right.
Conquer her.
Right.
I mean, literally, burn down the forest,
Right.
pollute her waters. She's nothing. That's really the attitude behind it. We can do whatever we want to her. We can rape her. We can do anything we want because we are the power. We are dominant.
Yeah, it's digging
So
us into a
sad.
grave, isn't it? Yeah. Wow.
But like we say, those things, those ideas are changing. Younger people are not buying into these old time ideas. It's going to take time, but
Yeah. Do you think that we'll see it in our lifetimes to where we have a more
you might.
egalitarian?
I won't. You might see a turning if we don't, wipe ourselves off the planet in the next 10 years by not addressing global warming, which isn't climate change, it's global warming caused by human emissions from their toys.
Yeah.
We've all been a part of that. We have so many things that are just makes life so much easier, but some of them we just really don't need.
True.
Some of them we ought to rethink.
True. True.
And we
So,
are now, like cars. We're rethinking how to fuel cars.
well, let's look at cars. Cars are representative of freedom to a lot of
And I
people.
love cars. I love driving.
Oh, yeah, me too.
But
But
I'd love
you're
to have
right
a
though.
hybrid. Huh?
What's funny is in one of the diaries of the women that I'm going to be talking about in my book. She's from the late 1800s, and she's a teacher in San Jose, California. And in her diary, she's talking about the electric cable cars and how that was how she got around town. And
Yeah.
isn't it fascinating how electric transit was a big deal in the early 20th century, and then the different railroads and different cable lines were being bought up by the car manufacturers and the tire manufacturers to make way for a new way of doing things. And
Yeah.
isn't it
Horseless
interesting how
carriage.
that's coming back?
But I don't think electric cars are the answer. I think hydrogen is the answer. I've read that before, that hydrogen is really what we ought to be using in our cars. And there's a company that's doing it now, I think. It's so political and it's so economic with the oil and oh,
Yes, the old
we've dug ourselves a big hole.
yes. Yeah, it's true. I remembered Arnold Schwarzenegger back when he was governor of California, was talking about the beautiful thing about using hydrogen is the byproduct is fresh water. That's
Yeah.
the emissions of using hydrogen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're so dumb. People can't think out of their little box.
Because it's tied to economics.
So you just we do what we do. We keep talking, writing, teaching, engaging, listening, and helping people to see, helping people to see it's not that you're wrong, it's that there's a bigger idea inherent in what you're saying. It's like you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but expand it. Excuse me.
Yeah.
It's like Jesus. His teachings are not what Christianity is based on. His teachings are new thought.
Ooh.
Totally. Yeah. It's done to you as you believe, the way in which you believe. His parables of taking the thistle out of the of the land. It's removing negativity. So much of what he said was pure new thought.
Mm.
But that's not what if you talk to a fundamentalist Christian and you say Jesus said these things which I do, you can do and more, they'll say, well, he didn't mean me. Of course he did. Who do you think he meant? And it's done unto you as you believe. Well, I don't know, they just gloss over it rather than say, man, he was pretty aware. He really was an enlightened being. He knew, he understood the principle and the presence. But it's not what their teaching's based on anymore.
Right. Right.
But the early New Thought people took his teachings and said, this is what is true. And they started putting it in modern language.
Amazing. So really what you're saying is that we don't have to become non-believers of Jesus. You're just saying, no. He actually was teaching the same thing that new thought is all about.
Yeah, we call him the master teacher. He actually was, if he existed, but whoever it was, whoever they attribute that to, that person knew what they were talking about. But he wasn't the first. Look at the ancient writing from India. It's all there.
Yeah. Right.
And the Abrahamic traditions are the ones that have had problems. Judaism, Islam, Christianity. But those Eastern mystical, Lao Tzu, Hinduism, Buddhism, those people were enlightened. They knew. I mean, the ancient Hindu writings. You talk to Dr. Bill about it sometime. I haven't read all of them, but he has. And he says, they already got the whole quantum physics thing back 5,000 years ago, whenever it was. It's all there. It's all there. So Jesus was one of them that emerged in that part of the world at that time to tell the truth. Buddha arose over here, and Ramakrishna and whoever all over Lao Tzu, they've always been with us. Hildegard de Bingen, Emma Curtis Hopkins, has been women too that keep bringing it back, and it keeps getting suppressed and that's what's going on now. Is you know what woke is a reference to us.
Yeah.
And they're trying to suppress it.
Yep.
So funny. So funny.
So when we're going out in the world and we're seeing the small mindset, the scared people I would say are feeling like they're in despair because they feel like they're being put out, right? Which is so ironic, right? Because they just want to do this to other people. But what do you advise that how do we defend
Well, I'm not
ourselves?
sure what you mean, but give me an example.
Well, okay. You have a family member that you absolutely love, but totally opposite. And you can't have a Thanksgiving dinner or a Christmas dinner going into belief systems because it's just too, let's just put it this way. They're still fighting the Civil War in the South, right? And you don't want to upset family members because you love them, but yet you can't be around them for too long because you can't believe what's coming out of their mouths. How do we how do
Well,
we
then you either stop going and just send them love from afar.
mm,
Sometimes you just have to stop being a part of it, or you speak up
mm,
and you say, guys, I don't believe anything you're saying, and I don't believe in the devil. So let's not, can we not talk about these things? Because otherwise I'm not coming back.
mm,
I have a friend whose son is very born again, and she finally said, if you're going to talk about this, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I
mm,
know I love you. I'm your mom. I'll always be your mom, but I don't want to hear it. I don't believe any of it, and you just keep it to yourself. So he did.
mm,
Otherwise, he wasn't going to have a relationship with it.
mm.
That's, so you can't change their mind necessarily unless they're looking, unless they're searching, and then they'll
That's the
find
thing. They have to want to know.
out. They have to, their religion has to fail them at some point, and
Mm,
it will. If they're thinking, if, you know, uh, yeah. Um, I say you just have to always speak your truth as best you can. And you can, sometimes when people say something to you like, well, da 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 da, you can say, that's not been my experience. Or, oh no, yeah, that's an interesting philosophy, but I don't believe any of it. I believe that da 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 da. Just gently, nicely. Um, not trying to convince them, just being true to yourself. I don't believe we should keep quiet for the sake of friendship. I think we should explain why this is a sore subject with us. And if you want me as a friend, we can't talk about that.
mm,
Because eventually you'll go away.
mm,
Eventually you won't be able to stand it
mm.
because you can't be yourself.
Wow.
It's a hard thing, but it's divided more families than almost anything else, religion.
Right. And it's supposed to be a unifying thing.
But that's why it fails people, because it isn't. And I'm not talking about personal devotion. I'm talking about institutionalized thinking. The gays are bad, this and that. And the Dalai Lama once said, if your religion tells you that you're better than other people, you're in the wrong religion.
Mm,
Something like that. If it excludes anybody.
mm,
And he also said, all religion must have some science today. That he's been involved in the study of science and spirituality, the Buddhist science dialogues. He's been doing that for years and years and years. He's a constant student of science because he knows it's a part of spirituality. It has to be. It's not a
yeah.
separate thing. They go
Right.
together. As we started off, they go together. They're walking hand in hand.
Right. It's just as you were saying earlier, right? The two opposites are as one. Man and woman, science and faith, night and day,
It's all one
they all
thing.
go together.
And when it comes to the, writing about when God was woman, I don't think it really matters or is necessary to even know about it, that there might have been a matriarchal society once. It's more about what's happening now and what are we going to do about it.
Mm, mm.
And the roots, but I mean you'll never convince some people that it was God was once a woman. That's just not going to happen.
Mm.
Not in this world, except for people like us. But God is neither man or woman. It's both and. It's male, female. It's masculine, feminine. It's love, intelligence. It's not a being in the sky. It's a field. It appears
Yes.
to be a field.
Yes. Tell me more because that when you said that when we were at CSA a couple weeks ago, that's when it really hit me. You said something akin to it is an energy field of infinite possibilities.
Yeah.
Can you
And it
just
coalesces.
yeah, can we just have you say it because that way I'm not interrupting the flow of the genius that you are in expressing that.
Hey, Emerson said we all have genius in us. I do believe that. See, when you find your thing, he said, do your thing and I shall know you. find your thing. Your thing is dancing and writing. My thing is speaking and writing. And I can dance too, but it's not my life. Used to be. But do your thing at the highest level you can and let it fall on the ears that can hear it.
Mhm.
There will be those. Just like we got connected because I said some things and you went, oh, I want to know more about that. So people will respond to you that way too. Like,
Yeah,
what do you mean, Jennifer? What do you mean by that?
right. Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool. So really, I think the lesson that I need to take from this wonderful counseling session slash interview is stop worrying about what people think and stop putting a lampshade over my light because I need to let it shine bright because I have a message for those that need to hear it.
And not only that, those same people that we at the dinner table, there's a part of them that longs for a truth that sets them free. You might just say one little thing and something will happen. In other words, people say people can't hear you until Dr. Carol, they can't hear you until they're ready. And I always say, if they're in my presence, they're ready. In other words, if they came to me for a spiritual mind treatment, sometimes people in our teaching say, well, what if they're not ready? I said, they wouldn't be talking to me if they weren't ready. Of course they're ready. Why would they attract me?
You got a point there.
Well, it's true, isn't it?
Oh yeah,
So you have
especially
to
if
know
thoughts
that
become things. Yeah, because they
you're in
manifest.
their presence for a reason.
Yeah.
They may talk behind your back. What does she think? What does she believe? I can't. And then they get, maybe they're talking. Maybe they're saying, well, I don't know. That's kind of, maybe there's some truth to that. Like, who knows? But don't believe you're there by accident. No such thing.
Fascinating. Oh, I could talk to you all day.
I can talk to you all day. Let's do it again.
I
Let's,
almost want to I almost want to do a part two. Like after I write the book, I almost want to have like a part two of like, here's what I did.
yeah, for sure. You can use dancing as a metaphor too.
You
Dancing,
know,
men
I
know
do have a
dancing.
couple of my books over my shoulder. The one that's in blue is what dancing taught me about running a successful business. So what'll be fun
Cool.
is to see,
Great idea.
who knows, maybe in the future I'll have another dance themed metaphor book about life. Who knows?
Dancing backwards in high heels.
There you go. Looking good. Yeah.
Well, thank
Look
you
what
so much for having me.
Thank you. And everybody who's been watching, thank you for joining me for this most amazing, enlightening conversation. Dr. Reverend Carol Carnes. Now, Carol, let's talk about how people can find you, what books you've written, your website, your blog. Please, this is the perfect time for you to
Okay.
share it with us how to find you.
Uh, First of all, you can use my website, www.carol dash, not underscore, but hyphen, carol-carnes.com. And you can message me that way too. But it also has my email, carolcarnes7@gmail. I teach Zoom classes, and if you want to know more about them, I'll send you information. I have a daily blog that comes in your email called Living Consciously. It's $5 a month or $60 a year. It comes every day, 7 days a week, right into your email. It's a 3-paragraph little mini essay. People really like them. How to live your life, and just anything that pops up. Sometimes I comment on the passing scene, but I always bring it back to how to integrate your new thought principles into that. I don't know why I'm looking over there. I've written 3 books. The last one was called Emerson and New Thought, how Emerson's essays influenced the science of mind. And if you're a student of Emerson or a student of science of mind, you really need to read that book. I'm not kidding. It's a nice, almost like Cliff Notes, how Emerson influenced Ernest Holmes to form the science of mind. Ernest Holmes said reading Emerson was like drinking water. He loved him so much. So there's that book. You can get that from Divorce, or you can, if you attend a Center for Spiritual Living or Center for Spiritual Awakening, they're two different things. You can ask their bookstore to order you one from Divorce, DEVORSS. The other two books you can get from lulu.com, LULU.com. One of them is called The Way In. And that is, I wrote it many years ago, 2010. It was about, it's a compilation of some of the Living Consciously essays. I love that little book. It's one of those things you can just open on any page and it'll mean something to you. And then the third book is a little novel I wrote about growing up in the 50s and discovering Black culture as a young white woman. Now, it's not autobiographical, but some of that did happen in my life, and I observed it in others. But it's a comment on how much prejudice and bigotry there really was in California, Southern California in the 50s, and no one thought there was. But it's a funny book. Some of it is downright hilarious. And I wrote it in 3 12-hour sittings. It just flew out of me. I just sat down and started typing on an old electric IBM machine, and it just flew out of me.
Wow.
And I love that little book. I really love it. I can open a page and say, did I write that? You know,
What is the title of that book?
Skylark. Can you tell me where my love can be? That's an
Skylark.
old jazz standard.
Okay.
Skylark, can you tell me where my love can be? Well, the backdrop for this book is jazz, because I was really into jazz when I was in high school. So anyway, lulu.com, LULU. They have both The Way In and Skylark. And then Emerson and New Thought through Divorce. That's it.
Oh my gosh.
So if you want to get on my Living Consciously list, just email me and I'll set you up.
Yes, and we have C Carnes 25 at AOL.com.
No, there's another one. ccarnes7 at Gmail.
Oh, ccarnes7 at gmail.com.
Yeah, yeah.
And www.carol-carnes.com. Carol-Carnes. So fantastic. Oh my goodness. I have to get going, but let me tell you how you've just filled me up. Thank you so very, very much. And everybody who's watching, thank you for tuning in. I hope you will follow what Dr. Reverend Carol Carnes is doing. She's making the world a better place, one person at a time, one teaching at a time. And I do hope that you will sign up for her blog and that you will read her books, because I've already written I've already read the Emerson and New Thought. I'm going to get Skylark next. I'm addicted. So
you'll like that one,
right?
I know it's a little racy.
I'm looking forward to it. Everybody, thank you so very much.
Bye.
And Doctor, thank you. Appreciate
Thank you, Jennifer.
Mwah. All right, everyone. Bye.